This session is going to be an interactive one, so I will be presenting some stuff with slides, but you should all have an activity sheet, so that hopefully you'll get your critical juices working. So the aim of this session really is to explore coach education, the development of a coaching framework. So part of the Erasmus-funded EU project was to develop a number of outputs. And one of these outputs was to develop a guideline, a guiding document, or a heuristic device to help us explore actually what does it really mean to develop an effective coach education system that contains an element of disability, some disability, whatever the kind of the rhetoric that's used, or in some cases completely missed. So I'm pleased to have a number of international guests, some guests in terms of research, academics, coach education, UK coaching. So we've got a real eclectic group represented in this workshop, and I think it reflects the kind of diversity across para-sport. So I've introduced myself. So my name is Dr. Tavo Huntley. I'm the project director for Para-Coach and a senior lecturer here. But the coaching workforce, the coaching framework document has been an international collaboration. So I've got my great friend and also my PhD director of studies, Professor Chris Cushion. Former. I did. Thanks, Brett. You let me through.
Thanks a lot.
So, yeah, I've got Chris involved, and his brings his expertise on coach education and learning going back to 2002 from Brunel, probably. And then we've got Rob Townsend over in Waikato, another ex-student of Chris's. Diane Culver from Canada. Charlotte was the first Para-Coach project officer, now at UCLAN, but she does a lot of work around transferable skills or life skills. So how do we create that transfer, not just through the sport, but actually can we transfer these skills into life? And then we've got Dr. Jackie Katatis, who is Brazilian but now works in Canada, and she's done some great work in a PhD around talent development in para-sport and using a real systems approach. So this is kind of what I'm going to present is an overview of the chapters. If you want to look at the document in detail, it will be on the Para-Coach website. So I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour, get you to think about or to reflect on your own perceptions of coach education and learning, and then we'll try and see how we can evolve the document even more. So thanks for your time. So like I said, I'll go through an introduction. We'll have a start with an activity. I'll talk you through some of the methodological considerations, and we'll look at the guidelines and learning outcomes and subjects. Okay, then we'll have an activity at the back end of that. So the whole purpose for me is around connecting policy, education, and practice, or allowing practice to inform coach education and inform policy. They're interconnected cogs, but policy generally seems to be the kind of the macro level of approach, and if we can impact or target that, hopefully it should drill down to education and hopefully into practice. But even though that should happen, we all know that there's some breakages in that link. So when we think about kind of para-sport education, I believe that we need to get policy, education, and practice working in synchronicity, because ultimately we want to have people with disability to have high quality sporting experiences. Okay? That's actually their human right. Okay? And we would argue, and we've done a paper on this, that actually the coaching workforce is central to achieving any EU UN local policies. The coaching workforce ultimately provides the opportunity for people with disability to participate in sport. Now, if they're that crucial, we would suggest that then they need to be highly educated, or at least educated and experienced. And we know globally that to be a coach, particularly in Latin America, you need to have a degree. Okay? Not a level 1, 2, 3, or 4. You have to have a degree to coach. So it's, globally, when we've been working with some of the partners, it's quite an interesting kind of diverse landscape, and we're trying to figure out what does that really look like. So what we do know, though, that there is actually a lack of specific coach education across the board. Okay, so we want to have an educated, skilled workforce, but there's actually very little coach education. There's some bits that are quite good, but it's often fragmented. You've got to go and try and find it if you're fortunate to find it. So it can work. And what we've also found is that actually there's not much research around the development of coach education. We're starting to understand a little bit about coach and athlete learning, but we know very little about the construction of coach education and how that really tries to, what we would suggest, infuse disability within that. So, first task. Okay, whether you want to go straight into individually, if you want to really get to know each other and start chatting, what we'd like to know is, what does an effective coach education system look like when you're considering disability? Okay? You've got 5 minutes, no pressure. I'm not going to measure success, okay? But I will cut you off, or Chris will cut you off for 5. So, if anyone wants to like to share some thoughts. Okay.
You need an external accreditation and quality assurance. You can't be internally managing coaching education. So the people who provide it can't be the ones who assess it. Assess their capability of providing it. The right learning environment and certain elements mandated, like understanding pedagogy, coverage, physiology, sport-specific regulations, safeguarding, things like how to create positive environments. And then Joe was just telling me about the importance of role models.
So you can see multiple environments where, particularly in sport, governing bodies don't require their coaches to have had any form of education as a coach. They will take experience in the job as being their education.
Yeah.
That could be great. You learn a huge amount from it. However, you do miss other parts of it. So I was within sport where performance planning is not very good at an elite end, which should be. And as a result, physiologists typically end up taking coaching jobs because they can do that. I used to be involved in a level 4 UKCC program of flight sports. Hockey had a GB system where you have GB men's head coach, GB women's head coach, assistant coaches. All the assistant coaches bought into this did it. The head coach never did. So unless you have the role models of people saying, I believe in this is good for our sport, you're fighting a losing battle. And the role model has to be the governing body and then the coaches.
I think something like buy-in from external organisations like insurance companies and things like that will help shut down places that don't have these, like, we get a lot of mum and pop gyms start up because they're, athletes. Susan has moved from a gym, she didn't think she was good enough. Like, so mum's just started a new gym, no education, no understanding. But she's insured for running that gym. And I think like external verification that people who are running who coaching these kids have had some quality training, especially with things like safeguarding, first aid, minimum.
Yeah. Great, so quality assurance there. You going to pick up on something there?
We'll hear from the rest of the group before I have my 2 points for you.
Anyone else would like to share?
I'll just kind of bullet points and things. So, purpose and aims, recipient goals, clearly understood. The system needs to be accessible to all, the information needs to be easy to understand. That was thinking about the level of the coach, so the grassroots coach doesn't necessarily need to have a degree in physiology to be able to coach at grassroots level. So getting that easy to understand information. And again, same thing, relevant levels within the system, depending on where the coach sits themselves and where they want to sit. Some coaches might just be happy staying at grassroots level. So don't force them into going into a level 2 course or a level 3 course if you don't want to do that. Links to extended and further learning, so self-development, that kind of thing. Interactive and interpersonal skills. You might be brilliant at sport yourself, but you can't actually convey that to the person in front of you that you're trying to coach. And the other thing, no, coach should be labelled. You shouldn't be a para-coach or a mainstream coach. You are a coach. You should be able to coach anybody who's looking for something.
Yeah, great. Whatever coaching is on. Okay, great. Fabulous insights. Come on, Peter.
Yeah, from the different perspective, I'm from Poland with my friends, and we made this question a few years ago because right now we build the system, and in my opinion, the good system is the system which responds for needs, and we define the needs, and from our perspective, needs is like a clear recognition for coaches from the different perspective, from the Paralympic committee, from the company. We need to know who is who prepared for job, and of course quality insurance is a fundamental thing, and we build our system on the quality insurance. 1 month ago, the Minister of Sport gave us the power to create an external validation body, and we will support sport federations which are respond for needs. Like a table tennis federation has needs to know, to have a qualified coaches at the Paralympic movement. So, and our job right now is to help them find a way to recognize coaches. And additionally, I made like a motivation because coaches need to be motivated because from my perspective, Olympic coaches are very talented and they are very often not interested to work with Paralympian with many reasons. So to find the proper motivation for talented people is very, very interesting and good to build effective coach education. And at the end, 2 factors: accessible. I don't know that is good pronunciation. That the all people who are feeling that I fit to the Paralympic movement may achieve some standard education and certification. And from the coach's perspective, we discussed. Coaches ask me why I must do it. So that's we need to find some benefits for them to help them make a decision and go the direction that we would like to see.
So like almost like a career trajectory, an aim that you want to.
Exactly.
So I have other point of view, but we are still from Poland. So I just understand a little different this question. So I point coaches in the center, and that in the system we will need some resources, so theoretical basis and other resources as well, some institutional support, so maybe it's quality assurance as well, but any other ways, and also some people support which will develop these coaches. So yeah, that's 3 pillars that we need in my opinion.
Okay, brilliant. Anyone else? We'll take one more.
And of course, interaction between those.
Go ahead.
From a slightly different direction. I think there was quite a few different voices on this. It wasn't just me. And I think we'd say, kind of, first of all of the above previously mentioned, but you can look across the room at this conference. There isn't we're not very many disabled people here. So the coach education system needs to be inclusive. I at a session trying to get more coaches into actually triathlon actually. And one of the people said, well, why don't we within the when you fill out your application form for the coach, why don't we have a box that says I'm prepared to coach someone who's disabled? So I said, oh, that's a fantastic one. Why don't we also have a box that says I'm prepared to coach someone who's black? And there was a look on his face, but it's like, isn't that the same thing? Because disability is one of the only isms that apparently is still legal. So it just needs to be inclusive, right? Inclusive from the point of view of seeing people, the role models within the sport, are disabled, but also the disability kind of knowledge and attitude as well. Disabled people are discriminated against, and that isn't always noted within the non-disabled coaches involved. So just because someone's coaching disability doesn't mean say they're not discriminatory.
Absolutely.
And you end up whereby there's a, the disability coaching. It's a ghetto. It's the Thursday afternoon after everyone else is finished doing something. Shouldn't think of that because just generally around kind of language and ownership of language, and just the socialisation of the samples all around disability. So we don't do anything around when a new person comes into the organisation around induction on disability, and what they should be saying, thinking, versus what the history and the values that they're actually bringing into it. So when someone says, I prefer to use the term para rather than disability, well, what's that got to do with you? Because I'm disabled and I'm not discriminated against on the grounds of disability. And I'm only disabled when you've got a flight of stairs there instead of ramp.
Very good. Awesome.
Just to add a yes and, if that's okay. Having some understanding of difference in the movement quality or the physicality of the people you're training is really important. I've got a rugby coach right now who's never touched a wheelchair in his life. He doesn't understand how to put it together, let alone how to use one. He thinks he can run the national team. It's really juxtaposition.
Well, it's one of them things where, I mean, I've said it before, like, to me, the different people on this stage, like, obviously disabled people want to be taught, you know what I mean? There's no good teaching them football if they're a basketball coach, you know what I mean? Because, they want to learn about, basketball, they don't want to learn about football. You know what I mean? You've got to teach them stuff that's not going to, form as their, going forward.
Right. Awesome.
So I've just thrown some stuff up on the board, hopefully you can all see it, but I'll talk through it as well. So it's really interesting, as soon as we start talking about systems, that people go out the door and it becomes a system. That system is a collection of people, right? So for me, we need to put the people in the middle. So essentially meet the participant needs, whether that's the athlete, the participant, the coach or whatever, we start there. So systems are around people. And it's really interesting to hear that people started reading off lists of curriculum content. We need to include this, we need to include that. But for me, context drives curriculum, not the other way around. So we put people in the middle, we think about the context, and that drives the curriculum. And that leads to something called coaching domains. So again, we take the term coach and we stretch it to mean anyone who does coaching. So that means it's meaningless as a term, frankly. It's absolutely meaningless. So we need to think about where people are working. So am I a participation coach working with a mixed ability group that includes some impairment or disability, so I need to make my sessions inclusive, versus I'm leading the GB Paralympic cycling team. There's two different domains and two extremely different roles which will require context drives curriculum, which will mean that they need completely different types of knowledge, I would argue. And then we end up with this space, and you can't see it because I usefully put it in front of the wrote it where the screens are, so you can't see it. So what I think is important to recognise is, for me, the context of levels drives a fake hierarchy, a fake power hierarchy around if I'm a 3, I'm better than a 2, and if I'm a 2, I'm better than a 1. And if I'm the one, you're just, you know, whatever. But it also creates a fake hierarchy around knowledge, for example. So, in my sport, netball, so I'm the head of coaching at netball, and the assumption is the person at the top needs the most knowledge, okay? But they're coaching athletes between 18 and 30, really. Whereas the participation coach is coaching people who are 6 and who are 66. So suddenly their knowledge and understanding is across the lifespan, but by definition we're saying they need less because they're less important in the hierarchy. So we've got all these problems around hierarchies. So not levels, no hierarchies, let's get rid of the rows. Let's be clear what we mean by coaches, and I talk about a coaching family. So if you're a leader, an activator, an instructor, whatever it is, you're part of the coaching family, and you're just as valuable to the sport, the organisation, as the person who runs the Olympic programme, because your job is just as important. And then you circle back. So the context of my coaching family people are in a particular space, working with a particular type of person, and that drives my curriculum, which puts the participants at the centre. Now for me, if we nail that, that's an effective coaching system. And I think, for me.
There's the same challenge with reward in coaching.
Right.
So in the employed coaching
Right.
field, where governing bodies, employers or coaches, believe that the person who's coaching you, top end of the department, should get paid the most. When actually, if you're the best athlete, you really want the best of all go that way.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
that way you get.
John, can you speak louder?
Sorry, I say that the
It's about remuneration and how much
Yeah.
people get paid. There's a value, market value to different types of coaches. But arguably, the people working in the community who drive in participation are the most valuable coaches. Sorry.
yeah,
They just get paid
it builds an arrogance and
Yeah. Agreed.
dependency.
Well, it's part of this false hierarchy, isn't it? This false hierarchy. That's the problem. And there was something else I was going to say, but just...
Do you think sport specificity needs to be come into this at some point? Like,
Well, it's part of the domain, isn't it? It's part of the sports stuff comes in here, the sports stuff comes in here, the sports stuff. So we inject it in, and it becomes less of a priority, arguably. But we put it in where we need to put it in. There's something else I was going to say. It will come back to me, I'm sure. Something.
Brilliant, awesome. Great insights, and I think this is why we enjoy opening up the floor like this, because it's really important that we start to have some critical discussions around this. And you know, it was interesting. In fact, let me move on, because it will help me make sense. Or can I walk? Can I move around a bit? Wait out to that. So I'll go over here. Sorry. So when we were kind of thinking about how do we create a coaching framework, to be honest with you, my first response was like, let's look at existing frameworks, let's see what they have, and let's just chuck a disability in there. Very easy. Okay, I can probably do that in half a morning. Well, not level 1, level 2, level 3. You know, let's just put inclusion in, and that will cover everything else. Let's do STEP. But actually, what we considered as a team was actually, because we don't know much about the literature, we don't know. When we look at the coach education systems, they're so different. And so what we felt we wanted to do over the development of the coaching framework, and we're on, almost 3.5 years into this, was this thing around co-production. And I know Brett will speak about co-production in his keynote tomorrow. And it's something about merging the academic space and the sporting space. You know, what is it that we understand in academia from the research that we do, the theoretical understandings around learning and development, and actually what does that mean in the sporting space, where at the minute, you know, there is a system of level 1 to 4. There is the European qualification framework, which is 1 to 4. We tend to go from novice to expert, so it's all very linear. But in my experience, yes.
Can I ask a question, Tom?
Yeah.
When you last had a plumber round to your house, did you ask him what level, or her, what level they were? Or when you went to the doctor, or when you spoke to a teacher, or an engineer, or an architect, or anybody in any job, anywhere, you asked them what their level was? No, sorry, I'll finish.
5 days to finish the job.
So, well, it comes back. I think it comes back to what Peter was saying about, you know, some form of career and development. So, what we wanted to do is create a number of hybrid learning zones. So this is one of them, and we can see that we've got sport-specific understandings. We've got individual perceptions. We've got, you know, an academic position as well. So what we're trying to do right now, and what we've done over the life cycle of the development of Paracoach, is to really develop a number of zones where we can kind of really negotiate, challenge, accept, understand different people's perspectives. And so in terms of the procedure, we did start with academia. We did look at the literature to see what's out there. And looked at, you know, theoretical perspectives around learning, and there's different ways of learning or theoretical approaches to learning. And then we went to the participants. So we did a workforce audit and followed up interviews with coaches across the EU. We had 313 respond to the survey. We followed that up with 26 interviews. So we really wanted to understand, okay, what are their needs? We wanted to put the coach right in the middle of that space in order to understand their knowledge, their experiences, and also gaps in knowledge. So that was the workforce audit. This is now on the Paracoach website. And then we've worked on 3 workshops, Poland, Tokyo, Liverpool, and we would consider this to be a workshop in terms of helping refine the document further. Unfortunately, we don't have many post-its, so we can't do death by post-its. And then once we condensed that, we wanted to go into a writing phase, which you know, the authors that I presented in the first slide, it's kind of like critical friends, and it's great to have, you know, someone with Chris's experience come and actually challenge us about, okay, what's the purpose of the framework? How is it different to what's going on? Is it going to challenge? Is it going to change? Or is it just going to be a tick box exercise that sits somewhere and actually no one really knows about it in 10 years? Which there's been a number of iterations of the UKCC framework from back in the day. And has anyone read it or reflected on it?
Questions about it, sure.
Oh. So, and then after this initial write-in, we sent it out to a number of different organisations across the EU for feedback, and we're now in the refining phase. We also tried to put together, well, we've not also tried, we did release a peer-reviewed article around infusing disability into coach education, drawing from some really great work in education. So they're further on down the line than we are. So it was great to collaborate with the team to put this together. And that peer review process is, again, another kind of challenge in the formation of where we wanted to get to, or what we wanted to communicate. Yes?
Those coaches that you consulted with, how many of them had a disability?
Going back to Ian, so maybe 3. It's out of that 330. It's a big challenge. It's one of the areas that I've noticed down on a list of PhDs in my book that I want to try and get out. And it's the same with the Special Olympics. There's very few transitioning into coaching when you think about the broad population.
When you think about the money that, with disrespect to different bodies, what they have to develop and increase the workforce, like, well, it's not like, so.
Yeah.
And the excuse used by governing bodies is typically we can only, for example, employ or deploy those that are interested or apply, rather than actually do something to change the dynamics so that a more diverse group of people might apply and might show interest. So there's always like an excuse rather than trying. Probably be they might advertise but they don't get coaches with a disability applying. That will typically be used as the excuse.
Part of that problem is minimum criteria, because disabled people are supported in schooling and in education, you know, and in previous work experience. And then I've seen, I've been going for coach jobs recently, and their minimum criteria is absolutely ridiculous in terms of the current capabilities of the disabled workforce.
But I agree with the Professor. Thank you. I wouldn't say it there, but I can't remember.
Chris?
But I agree that there's different levels, not just coaching, but we have disability sport, which I hate the term disability sport, because what is disability sport? It's a sport. But there are certain levels that where people with a lower qualification can really kickstart participation. You don't have to be a level 2, level 3 coach. You know, we're talking more multi-sports, fundamental group levels, things like that. So that's, to me, is where workforce is needed.
So from a UK coaching perspective, there is something we want to address working with partners, which try to encourage people to have a skills and experience-based approach, and that's not only in coaching roles, but also in terms of employment as well. So if we look at board positions, there's a big push to diversify board positions, board any position in the organisation. Now, it's also, which was the question is, not is the qualification, not what qualifications they have, but actually, and obviously the time that that's needed, but actually what's the skill, what's the experience, what can, what's needed to bring, and what can you bring.
And how can you demonstrate that in 300 words of your application? Well, that's part of the problem. Support in
Yeah, and
demonstrating
is your application process open, accessible, how can you support people to get through the application process?
I think part of the problem, and you can see this is a hot horse of mine, so I do apologise in advance about that. But part of your problem is about, because it's not the main role, and we all think coaches are level 2 or whatever, and there isn't this coach of diversity of workforce, so we're all part of a coaching family of which there are a diversity of roles. We end up with modes of entry problems. So what's your mode of entry, or in other words, where do I belong? And the issue that you have is everybody, you get funneled into a bottleneck of being level 2, which costs this, which isn't accessible, which runs once a year, which takes this amount of time, when somebody in a coaching family needs enough to be able to get them up and running. So you need multiple entry points into the coaching structure, rather than we start with this amount of people who are interested, and then we corral them and bottleneck into this, saying you need to get this level to do this, and straight away people are put off. But I think to the point, it's about role models as well. You need to see it to be it, right? So.
And to challenge that even more, 10 years ago when I became disabled, 13 years ago when I became disabled, I did the London Sport had a coaches, like, let's get disabled people coaching. So they did free training for people with disabilities. They followed me into swimming, which wasn't my first love, but, and it was a great course in terms of how to coach, and it's helped me really well throughout my career in other sports. But when I then, I did level 1 qualification, level 2 qualifications, safeguarding qualification, all for free, and then I went into every swimming centre that was looking for people, and they're like, oh, you can't wash the floors or life save, so you can't come and get a job.
So the thing is that they don't know whether you can't do that, so you have to try to do it, I mean,
yeah.
I know people that, work with me, like, they can go and get them, after COVID, and they're still in their real training, so have you?
Yeah, when I did a life saving test, I did better than most of them.
Yeah.
People
Very good.
Because as a cheerleader, I can pick people up, no problem. Yeah.
Lots of technology, people just shape like people assuming. I mean, I was told that when I came to university, look, like, that mean you've got, you don't think it's something, you just said you never love them, you don't have to leave them, it's more than it's
Okay, great. Listen, I know this is an ongoing topical debate. I want to get through the presentation. I'm sorry, I'm talking about time earlier, but we'll get some other opportunities to feed back in. Can you just, please, we've literally only got 20 minutes to, and I want to get you to an activity which might help you kind of crystallize some of this as well. So in terms of the coaching framework, there's a number of chapters that we've covered, and that's really what we're going to just give you some insight into in a minute. Okay? So one of the things we really want to try and do within the framework is help people understand actually what does it mean, what does disability mean, and how our assumptions about disability actually either include or exclude people. And it's not just about social, it's not just about physical barriers, but actually it's about the language that we use that constrains the agency of people with disability, of athletes, rather than actually empowers them or gives them choice and autonomy. And so within the framework we cover the different models, we call them models, they're not quite models, but different models of disability, which has also implications for the way you would go about integrating disability within coach education. So the medical model would be, okay, let's do your level 1, and then you will bolt on a learning impairment workshop for about 2 hours, and then you've ticked the box, thank you very much. That would be a very medical model approach. The social model, and again, the social model has been great. For those of you who understand this, the social model was developed probably in the 1960s and has done much to inform our understanding of equality and diversity, particularly for people with disability. And they would suggest that actually we need to include disability within coach education. It's only just starting to do that through an inclusion and infusion approach. Well, the problem with the social model is that it's almost tick, we cover disability. Okay, so the level 1, I've done the FA level 1 course, online course now, so I can coach my 6-year-old football on a Saturday morning, and we've touched on a bit of disability. Okay, tick. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Okay, so what we would suggest is we go for a social relational model, because actually, if someone comes to my session with the 6-year-olds, you know, if they've got cerebral palsy or a learning impairment or any range of disability or along that, I'm going to have to change or adapt in a different way my session. So we really need to understand impairment effect. That impairment effect also impacts their lifestyle, about not just in sport, about how they're included in their PE sessions, how they're included in life or in wider society, which then also reflects particularly a construction around disability. So if it's very ableist, so we're very much in an ableist society, you know, society caters for an able-bodied society rather than a disabled body. And so we also need to understand what are the barriers. Okay? We have made progress, okay? But there's still quite a lot more to do. And particularly when you start to get to understand some of the athletes and, you know, what drives them, but also their experiences, their passions, the way even COVID affects their emotional state. Okay, there's a whole kind of a whole aspect to the athletes that we need to understand, as opposed to they're just, you know, can we coach them? Yes. Do we coach disabled people? Yes. By the way, we're not interested in what your day was like, what your family was like, or what your career was like. So almost the motivation is pushed away in the kind of the medical model, but a social relational model we would suggest is a more inclusive, a more holistic way of understanding disability that allows the coach to say, okay, you are Jerry, you are a 12-year-old, you're passionate about football, great. Okay, how do I need to adapt my session? What equipment may you need? Okay, so we can have those real, honest conversations about a person's impairment. You know, I did a workshop with British Athletics, and we started to talk about impairment, and one athlete came up to me and said, and he was very emotional on the verge of tears, he said, "No one has ever asked me about me and my impairment." And this was in a session like this with kind of coaches and athletes, and none of the coaches were acknowledging, it was almost like, you don't talk about that, you don't talk about disability.
I think some of this because it's attitudinal as well. And the reason why we're not asking about impairment is because we're not disabled, and there's a, we don't really talk about that attitude towards it, and that's the reason why. Actually,
Well, it's not a recognition, really, like, I mean,
previously there were a lot of coaches who were disabled.
Yeah. Now, interesting, and I'll speak about this tomorrow. Some of the interviews that I've done, there's a notion that we weeded out disability. So we want performance coaches, we weed out disability. So it's the ableist rhetoric, we'll come on to that. And it's interesting because we felt in chapter 2 that we wanted to add empowerment to inclusion, because yes, there's an ideal, okay, we want to have an inclusive society. There's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is, for some people with disability and some impairment, it is actually quite challenging to create an idealistic world. Okay, and it's great. Ian talked about the steps or the ramp. You know, if you're a wheelie, you want to go up a ramp. If you're visually impaired, okay, you prefer the steps, because the cane hits the bottom of the step and gives you a traction in terms of how I'm now going up steps. Great, thanks, Ian. So we look at this and we can recognize that actually sport is very much segmented. You can have your inclusive club, brilliant. You can have integrated, which you tend to see in athletics, swimming, and cycling. You have separate sports that completely disabled disability sports, wheelchair rugby, goalball, okay? And then you've got the exclusion. So for me, the question is, if you are an inclusive environment, or an integrated environment, or even in a separate environment, okay, we need to, we need to think about empowerment, which we would suggest is giving people control and mastery, okay, giving them to choose where they want to participate, the level that they want to participate to, which is borrowed from Wallerstein. Coach and athlete learning. So when we come into coach and athlete learning, we believe, and the second quote there, so Christian and Mark's over there, we talk about that coaches need practical cultural competencies, including social identity as dispositions which operate outside of the consciousness. So there's a sense that we are socialized. We have a view of coaching, of athletes, of disability that is very socially constructed. And it comes about your perceptions, and we would probably carry a very ableist perspective. And therefore, what we would argue for is that we need critical reflexivity, which means that as coaches, academics, athletes, coach developers, we need to deconstruct our perception, or cultural perceptions about sport, about ability, about success. Okay? And DePaul in 1997 said, disability allows us to make problematic the socially constructed nature of sport, and once, or if done so, opens us to alternative constructions. How would we create a new coach education system if we really kind of deconstruct our ableist thinking around disability? Jackie Patatis, like I said earlier, put together this incredible work in Brazil around an athlete development framework. You can see it's not linear. It's very contextualized. It's very much about the different types of athletes with different abilities, and they need to be attracted into the sport. They need to know the opportunities. And then you progress through or progress along, and if you want to, into high performance, if you want to, and then the important thing is you transition out of high performance, hopefully into a career in sport. But ultimately, all the way through, we need to understand about disability rights, that it's their right to be able to participate in all aspects of sport. I'll come to you now. Okay, so we have these learning outcomes. So we believe that learning outcome 1, that we should have a framework that's informed by models of disability. Okay? We use them together as a reflective device. We need to understand how the disabling aspects of practice, leadership, communication, and behavior, this is implicit. I don't think coaches want to go out there to disable people, but actually just by the implicit socialization, they will do this just through practice, the unquestioned practice. And we want to look at how do we create a lens of adaptability, how do we put together empowering practices, we give athletes autonomy, choice, how do we create a life skills framework? So, whether you're 6, 10, 12, 18, 25, okay, how do we create environments where athletes are able to develop skills that actually be able to transcend into some form of career? And we also need to understand the physical and the social impact of impairment and how this might lead to meeting the athlete. So this is really focusing around the athlete's needs. So we have these kind of subject areas linked to those learning outcomes, and this is where we're going to go into your 3 tasks. Okay, so we've got the subject area, so we would suggest that we need to understand the right, so the human right perspective, to inclusive and empower environments. To do that, we would suggest you need to understand how disability is constructed within society. We then need to understand what does it mean to be inclusive, but also empowering. You can do that through developing a coaching philosophy. And again, Chris and Mark have done some work on that. We believe and we would suggest that coaches need to become more reflexive. Coach education needs to promote reflexivity, which is turning the lens back on yourself. We need to understand our athletes holistically. We do need to understand the impairment effect in terms of what the impact of the impairment on function, and then what does that mean for adaptability? How do we create the right kind of practices that promote learning, understanding barriers in sport and physical activity, working with athletes, wider network, not just the athlete. There's a whole, in some cases, you've got carers, nurses, parents that are part of their team. How do we work with those guys? And basically, how do we create that development of transferable skills? Athlete safeguarding and welfare is just by the by. It's just like a big tip. So what we'd like you to do is to look at these 3 activities in the remaining time. Okay, how can this framework support the development of coach education? Which subject areas do you identify with and why? And and can you identify other subjects that should be included in the framework? Okay, can we do, in fact, can you just answer question 4? Okay, if there's any subjects that you think need to be going on in the framework, and then we'll be transitioning out.